The year is 68 AD, and the Apostle John is imprisoned on the Roman island of Patmos. On the island, the events of the end are revealed. Although he is in old age, John is clear in mind and greatly favored. At this time, John receives one of the most important visions ever recorded. It is a revelation of the time of the end. The name Revelation means to reveal. However, Revelation is a symbolic book of prophecy. To know the meaning of the prophecy, the reader must allow the Bible to explain itself. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. Revelation chapter 12 verse 1 and 2. In a literal way, the woman represents Mary, the mother of Jesus. However, a pure woman in Scripture is also a symbol of Israel, God's people, and God's church. Hear ye this word which I take up against you, even a lamentation, O house of Israel. The Virgin of Israel is fallen. She shall no more rise. She is forsaken upon her land. There is none to raise her up. Amos chapter 5 verse 1 and 2. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church, and gave himself for it. Ephesians chapter 5 verse 25. Therefore, in Revelation chapter 12, the woman is God's church and is presented as the bride of Jesus Christ. And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. Revelation chapter 12 verse 5. The child to be born of the woman is Jesus Christ the Messiah, who was born of his mother Mary, through the bloodline of King David of Israel. After Jesus' death, Jesus rose from the dead and he sat at the right hand of God. If you be risen with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ sits on the right hand of God. Colossians 3, verse 1. The sun that clothes the woman is symbolic of the church's belief in Jesus, his gospel and his word. As the sun gives light, so does Jesus give light to the world through his word. Then spake Jesus again to them, saying, I am the light of the world. He that follows me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. John chapter 8, verse 12. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet, and a light unto my path. Psalms 119, verse 105. But the path of the just is as the shining light, that shines more and more to the perfect day. Proverbs chapter 4 verse 18. The moon represents the Old Testament, which is the foundation of Israel and God's church. The moon is the lesser light that represents the gospel of Jesus in the Old Testament era, concealed in the ceremony of the sanctuary service. The Old Testament is Jesus concealed in ceremonies of the sanctuary, while the New Testament is Jesus revealed in person. This Old Testament foundation includes God's law, the 10 Commandments, the standard for all humanity. Speaking of the symbol of the moon, Adam Clarke in his Bible commentary says, the Jewish typical worship, the Mosaic system of rites and ceremonies, could not have been better represented, for it was the shadow of good things to come. At the rising of the sun, the night is ended, and the lunar light is no longer necessary, as the sun enlightens her shines full upon the earth. Exactly in the same way, the whole Jewish system of types and shadows has been superseded by the life and death of Jesus Christ. And upon her head, a crown of 12 stars. Revelation chapter 12, verse 1. The word stars in Revelation is used to represent angels. Angels are messengers. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 candlesticks which you saw are the 7 churches. Revelation chapter 1 verse 20. The crown of 12 stars on the woman church represent the 12 apostles, who were the first messengers of the New Testament church. Each of them were instructed to take the gospel of Jesus Christ to the world. This is known as the Great Commission. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent, called the devil and Satan, which deceived the whole world. Revelation chapter 12 verse 9. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. Revelation chapter 12 verse 4. The dragon in John's vision is identified as the devil. It was Satan that influenced King Herod to stop the birth of Jesus, the King of the Jews. To stop the Messiah, Herod ordered the murder of all children 2 years and younger, thus hoping to kill Jesus among them. Herod, known as the King of the Jews, saw Jesus as a threat to his crown. Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceedingly angry and sent forth and killed all the children that were in Bethlehem, and in all the coasts thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. Matthew chapter 2 verse 16. Although the red dragon beast symbolizes Satan in John's vision, Satan uses people on earth to accomplish his plans. Thus, the red dragon beast also represents the civil power of Rome, for it was Rome which Herod represented. The same association between an animal and a civil power can also be seen in the book of Daniel. The ram which thou saw, having 2 horns, are the kings of Media and Persia, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Daniel chapter 8 verse 20 and 21. Most Bible scholars agree that the great horn that was broken off was Alexander the Great, for it was Alexander's kingdom that succeeded Persia. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. Revelation chapter 12 verse 3. Crowns in Revelation represent monarchies and kings. When the crowns are considered, we find more evidence for the power of Rome. Looking into the ancient history of Rome, we see Rome was founded and unified by 7 kings in the ancient regal period. The 7 ancient kings of pagan Rome were Romulus, the founder; Numa Pompilius, the second king; Tullius Hositilius, the third king; Ancus Marcius, the fourth king; Tarquinius Priscus, the fifth king; Servius Tullius, the sixth king; and Tarquinius Superbus, the seventh and last king. Additionally, the heads of the red dragon beast are more evidence that Rome is represented by the red dragon beast. And here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. Revelation chapter 17 verse 9. Looking at historical evidence, we find the city of pagan Rome was founded upon 7 hills. Remarkably, Rome was known as the city of the 7 hills for centuries. The 7 hills of Rome are the Aventine, the Caelian, the Capitoline, the Esquiline, the Palatine, the Quirinal, and the Viminal. These 7 hills of Rome are known in Latin as Septimontes, which, literally translated, means 7 mountains. On the heads of the red dragon beast are 10 horns, as we saw earlier in the book of Daniel. The horns represent kings or kingdoms. The ram which thou saw, having 2 horns, are the kings of Media and Persia, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Daniel chapter 8 verse 20 and 21. As history shows, Greece was succeeded by Rome, and after many years Rome decayed and fell into 10 divided kingdoms. Thus historically, the 10 horns can be identified as the 10 divisions of Rome after the fall of the Roman Empire. The 10 divisions are the Visigoths of Spain, Anglo-Saxons of England, Franks of France, Alemanni of Germany, Burgundians of Switzerland, Lombards of Italy, Suevi of Portugal, the Heruli, which have been destroyed and rooted up by the papal crusade sword. The Ostrogoths, which have been destroyed and rooted up by the papal sword. And the Vandals, which have also been destroyed and rooted up by the papal sword. As John's vision continues, he sees the same red dragon beast, which is Satan, continuing his attack on the Christian church after the resurrection of Jesus. And when the dragon saw that he was cast into the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. Revelation chapter 12 verse 13. History clearly records the repeated persecution of God's true church down through the ages by both pagan Rome and by papal Rome. The pagan Roman state was productive in accusing Christians and condemning them to death. However, the time period presented in this prophecy refers to a specific time period of persecution. This prophetic time period, 1260 days, is understood as literal years when using the day for a year principle. This principle is found in the book of Ezekiel. And when you have accomplished them, lie again on your right side, and you shall bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days. I have appointed you each day for a year. Ezekiel chapter 4 verse 6. The time period of persecution seen by John was carried out by Rome. However, not from the pagan Roman Empire, but surprisingly, by the Roman papacy, a professed Christian institution. This persecution started not long after the papacy arose to power in 538 AD. The papacy began her time of persecution by uprooting and destroying 3 of the kingdoms represented by the 10 horns on the head of the red dragon. Again, the 3 horns were the Heruli, the Ostrogoths, and the Vandals. All groups were persecuted and destroyed by the papal sword. This persecution was for opposing the teachings of the papacy. This time of persecution lasted precisely 1260 years, until finally, the Pope was captured by General Berthier and imprisoned in 1798 AD. Later, the Pope died in prison and the prophecy was fulfilled. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast. Revelation chapter 13 verse 3. And the woman fled into the wilderness. She has a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1260 days. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness into her place, where she is nourished for a time, and times, and half a time, from the face of the serpent. Revelation chapter 12, verses 6 and 14. The original word translated wilderness in verse 14 is Aramus. This word means solitary. Thus, in the face of persecution, the true Christians were forced to live, worship, and witness in solitary places. History records such solitary places of the Waldensians and Albigensians. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth, and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. Revelation chapter 12, verses 14 and 15 and 16. The water coming out of the mouth of the red dragon beast represents people, languages, and nations. And he said unto me, the waters which you saw, where the horse sits, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. Revelation chapter 17 verse 15. During the reign of Constantine the Great, Christianity was made the state religion. Thus, the influential pagan temples then became influential counterfeit Christian churches. Virtually overnight, this great accumulation of counterfeit Christians in the churches hindered and diluted the work of God's true church. Thus, it was as if a great flood of people represented in the prophecy by water, washed into the Christian churches, resulting in confusion, compromise, and eventually apostasy. Today, the counterfeit church, known as the Roman Catholic Church, created confusion and competition for God's true church, and over time even persecuted God's true church. History testifies to many that have been put to death by the papacy over the centuries, persecuted by holy war and inquisitions. On August 22, 1556 AD, Pomponio Algerio, an Italian civil law student at the University of Padua, after attracting attention from the Roman Inquisition for refusing to conform to church doctrine because of his Lutheran beliefs, was boiled alive in oil until he died on August 23, 1572 AD, in response to the St. Bartholomew's massacre, where at least 20,000 people or more were murdered for their religious beliefs. Pope Gregory XIII ordered a song be sung as a special thanksgiving, and had a medal struck commemorating that event. In vision, John sees that the wilderness experience of the church would last 1,260 years. However, during the period of persecution, God provided places of protection and survival for the woman church, and for the preservation of God's word. At the end of the 1,260-year persecution period, in 1798, when the papacy suffered what looked like to be a mortal wound, a new nation arrived in 1789. This new and free nation was the United States of America, where religious freedom was to be secure. Many fled to the new America, which, compared to Europe, was sparsely populated. Thus, America was a wilderness, provided by God, for the protection of religious freedom. And the dragon was angry with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Revelation chapter 12 verse 17. John writes that a remnant of God's true church will exist and be persecuted again. A remnant is a part of the original. Thus, the remnant in Revelation refers to a church that observes the same beliefs as the early church. The remnant, as described by John, are those individuals that observe the commandments of God, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. These end-time Christians are God's true church on earth. This remnant church has two identifying characteristics. They keep the commandments of God, and have the spirit of prophecy. And I fell at his feet to worship him. And he said unto me, See that you do it not. I am your fellow servant, and of your brethren that have the testimony of Jesus. Worship God, for the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. Revelation chapter 19, verses 17 and 10. Today, there is a church that matches the biblical description of God's remnant church. That church teaches the observance of God's commandments and has prophetic writings. That remnant church is the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It is our hope, dear friend, that you will join this remnant church today, and that you will prepare for the soon return of Jesus Christ. You can find more amazing truth online at www.amazingfacts.org. As we move towards the end of time, may the God of peace be with us always. Thank you for watching, and good night.